Dan Cohen. Dan, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. You were a big hit with our viewers last time you were on. Tell us how you're feeling this 2 months or so now on since we last saw you. Netanyahu has kind of shot their fox today, hasn't he? What's the point of Blinken shuttling? What's the point of Joe Biden stumbling? What's the point of Western liberals agonizing if Netanyahu's told them absolutely outright there ain't going to be no ceasefire? How do you feel about it?
Well, it's the phoniest good cop, bad cop routine I think I've ever seen between the Biden administration playing the good cop and pretending that something might be in the works, even though Biden, as we saw yesterday, wasn't even sure of what's going on and could barely stutter a complete sentence out when he wasn't thinking he was meeting with a dead French president. But of course, Netanyahu is playing the bad cop as he always does. So liberals can say, well, we support Israel, but we don't like Netanyahu, as if he is not the quintessential prime minister of Israel. He's the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history. So he represents everything about Israel. But I mean, this has been all the talk about a captive exchange has been farcical all along, basically since the only temporary, what did they call it, a pause in late November in order to exchange some of the captives. Everything since then has been farcical. And even before that, because as I showed in an investigation in Uncaptured, you can read if you go to uncaptured.media, called Netanyahu and his Kahanist allies wage psy war against families of the captives, something like that. Netanyahu has been doing exactly that. He has been doing everything possible to deceive, to trick the families, the vast majority of the families of captives who want some kind of negotiation, whether that's a full ceasefire and an all-for-all exchange, which is what Hamas has demanded all along, or some kind of negotiation. And so what he's done is take a tiny handful of the most fanatical elements of the families of captives and promote them as if they're the majority. Just today, a guy named Tzvika Moore, who's a fanatical whack job settler who lives in Kiryat Arba in the West Bank, he was among families of captives here in Washington, D.C., meeting with several powerful senators and members of the House of Representatives, saying, talking about the plight of their families in Gaza. Meanwhile, this is a guy who partnered with Netanyahu and explicitly said that he wants to sacrifice his son in order to commit genocide in Gaza. These are Netanyahu's allies. So this is what's really going on. Everything else is just a dog and pony show.
Just before we go on further down that track, explain what happened when Joe Biden communed with the dead President Francois Mitterrand, who he thought was president of Germany. But whether of Germany or France, he thought he spoke to him very recently, since October. Tell the viewers about that.
Yeah, I don't know where he was speaking, what venue exactly, but it was just another classic Biden moment where he's just mumbling unintelligibly and clearly is not in his right mind, because we have, in the White House is a very severe case of elder abuse. But that's, what our political system is. That's what it's produced in the mighty Democratic Party. So Joe Biden is clearly suffering from dementia and is planning to run for a second term, but it's just another statement, another obvious indication, indisputable, that he's not all there. He is not the Joe Biden of even during the Obama era. He is gone.
Gone, indeed. Now, the tanks and heavy guns are now massed around Rafah. Now, I know Rafah very well, as you do yourself, having been there many times, passed through the gates there many times. Unimaginably, there's 1.5 million people there now because there's actually nowhere else to be. They're living in unbelievable squalor, and Israel is about to attack. What's going to happen there?
I mean, it's just the most horrific crime, one after the other. I mean, we've seen this. We're going on 4 months now, and all of these Palestinians in Gaza who were told, go south because that's where it's safe. And if you don't, they said, if you don't go south, then you will be considered a member of Hamas, and therefore you're not a civilian. And many people were unable to go or refused to leave their homes, and they were bombed inside their homes in the north. However, there were many, of course, who did flee south, who were shot at and bombed, who were interrogated, and there were even summary executions at Israeli checkpoints heading south through Gaza, through Khan Yunis, all the way to Rafah. And now the Israelis, unable to combat the resistance and their spiderweb network of tunnels that stretch hundreds of kilometers, several hundred kilometers throughout the Gaza Strip, and the Israelis are just unable to really do anything. They're punishing the civilians. So now that they've obliterated Gaza, they've obliterated the north, they have waged a horrific war on Khan Yunis and kind of the center and heading towards the south, and they've had no real military success there, only punished civilians. And now they are saying that they're going to attack Rafah, which is where they told everyone to go. So this is likely, if this goes on, which it appears it will be, they're completely surrounded, then this will be even more horrific carnage that, Joe Biden and the State Department will say, will shrug their shoulders about and say, oh, we've told Israel to be better about slaughtering civilians. We've communicated to them. But Israel's operating with total impunity. This is just a complete slaughter in every sense of the word. And as we know from the ICJ, this is officially genocide. And Israel has been ordered to not carry out any acts of genocide and has carried out many of those since we heard from the ICJ. So that's sadly what we have in store is more genocide. This is, the international rules-based order that Tony Blinken likes to talk about. It is genocidal.
Now, an unusual thing happened in the Congress, didn't it, this week? The Republican majority in the House tried to send, because of course Americans are awash with money, they have no problems at home, they've got lots of spare, so they tried to send $17 billion to Israel. That's another $17 billion to Israel. And it failed. It was defeated on the floor of the House. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there's a huge fight in the Congress about that because Republicans want more and more so-called border security. Even this concept is basically farcical. I mean, we do have huge amounts of people coming over our border, but it's not for lack of security. It's because we have basically obliterated entire countries in Latin America and elsewhere and taken their wealth and sanctioned them, basically forcing them to flee their countries. So for the Republicans, passing this money, these billions and billions of dollars to go to Ukraine and to Israel is contingent upon further militarization of the southern border, as if lining the border with military and more Department of Homeland Security, which since 9/11 has become the largest the largest part of the U.S. government. That's basically what it comes down to. So there has to be more and more militarization of the U.S. border in order for Republicans to fully agree to what Democrats want to do to send to Israel another $13 billion. So this, I mean, you can just see the divide is not over anything of principle, of anything that's going to help people. It's not, I'm about to get on a train at Union Station in the main train station in Washington D.C. If you go down there, all that's out front are homeless people living in tents. That's what this beautiful Union Station, this stately building, is surrounded by homeless people all over the streets in the Capitol here in Washington, D.C. So neither of the parties, neither Republicans nor Democrats, want to address the actual issues facing Americans: inflation, the economy, hunger, these kinds of things. They just want to send more money to their different piggy banks to enrich, whether it's the military-industrial complex overseas or the Israel lobby, or line the pockets of military contractors that are gonna have a bonanza on the border.
Well, it's only a few months to go until you get to change all that. You can choose bonkers Biden, you can choose Zion Don Trump, or you can go for crazy Kennedy. Which do you think the people are going to go for at this stage?
Well, there's no question that Donald Trump is the most popular politician in America. Clearly, nobody believes in Joe Biden, not even the people around him. That's just they're playing charades as if he's like a real president when obviously he has no power. RFK, Bobby Kennedy is sort of playing the pseudo anti-establishment role, except he's said that he would do basically the exact same thing that Biden is doing with Israel. He's a total Zionist. He's in the Israel lobby's pocket. We see him. I mean, my question for Bobby Kennedy is: he says he would free Assange. What is he doing making public appearances with Miriam Adelson, the husband of the late Sheldon Adelson, whose fortune, who was the front man basically for the CIA, as you were discussing, spying on Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy? That undermines everything that Bobby Kennedy claims to represent, and let alone his support for genocide in Gaza. So we have him playing this kind of pseudo anti-establishment role. And then, of course, we have Donald Trump, who, I mean, we know he says he would, this war in Gaza wouldn't have happened. He would end the Ukraine war. Meanwhile, he does appearances with the most rabid neocons in all of Congress, with Lindsey Graham, who wants to bomb Iran, who wants to kill all Palestinians, who wants Ukraine to fight until its last man. So Donald Trump is basically fake too. He's, it's our entire political system is fake, and it's pretty obvious that nothing good is going to come from it, no matter who you vote for.
Well, if it's any consolation, and I know it won't be, ours is just as fake over on this side of the Atlantic. Dan Cohen, as always, a pleasure, an honor to have you on the mother of all talk shows.